Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man who's been let loose from his noose that's kept him hanging around. Here is the captain.
And it's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Today, we are still sipping on this hazy IPA called Boneface Killer from Tactical Brewing, very fittingly featuring a Skeletor type character imagery on the beautiful beer can art. And Tactical has some of the very, very best beer can art in all of the business. Pour this one in a glass because she got good body. Garage grade 4 and 3/4 bottle caps out of 5. And let's give some thanks and praise to our good garage friends. First up, a cheers to Amy Birch in Louisville, Texas.
And a big tall cans in the air to Sophie in Minnesota.
Next up, we have Jen Daly in Osceola, Indiana. And last but certainly not least, we have a triple cheers to Dave, Nikki, and Randy in Northern Utah. Everyone we just mentioned, they helped us out with this week's beer fund, gave us a beer for the show, and for that, we thank you.
Yeah, BWRUN Beer Run. For everything true crime, check out truecrimegarage.com. If you need more content, then check out our show Off the Record on Patreon or Apple Podcast subscription, and we will tickle your earballs, and that's enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. When we left off here, Captain, we have 2 unsolved murders, and in my humble garage opinion, they are eerily similar in nature and in the details. And it seems like the detectives agreed as well back in 1992 when they were conducting their investigations. Regarding the investigation to the second murder in this series here is Mary Ellen Wise. And we talked at length about her abduction and then being moved to 2 different banks to make transactions, and then later her body being found. But one thing that we will read in the papers and see on the news when the detectives are asking for help or being probed themselves and being asked about the case and the investigation is detectives explained why the lack of forced entry mattered in the Mary Ellen Wise case. And they stated clearly that if Mary Ellen did not know her abductor, it would mean that she opened her door to a stranger. This would be in complete contrast to something that her family said to investigators. They're saying she would not. This was not her nature. She was very, very cautious, a very cautious person. She would not open her door to a stranger. So that either means A, like we talked about in episode 1, perhaps the assailant approached her while she was in the garage door open. She's doing laundry. We know that there certainly had to have been a lot of activity in that garage based off of blood evidence, clear signs of a struggle. And again, we talked about her dogs. So either this was somebody that she knew and she did let in. The dogs didn't perceive any kind of threat. They perhaps went out to the garage together and then the attack happened, or the assailant had to approach the victim inside of that garage on that morning.
Well, like I said, if they left the door open, maybe it's a sneak attack, or maybe there's some ruse. And in the first murder, because of some of the items left behind, the duct tape, the gloves, and then the eyewitnesses seeing this small truck with possibly a toolbox in the back, it makes me wonder if there's some kind of connection to a handyman or handyman service.
About a week after the murder of Mary Ellen Wise, an anonymous letter was sent to the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. Now, we don't have the complete contents of this letter. And to my knowledge, I don't think it's ever been made public. Now, we don't know what was discussed in the letter, what was mentioned, or the length of the letter other than what law enforcement has chose to make public. And what they've made public is that in one portion of this letter, the writer offered an opinion about the killer's identity and mentioned a young man who was a boxer and a dog owner. And what I am here to tell you all of these years later is, while very interesting, the letter did not solve the case. It just simply became part of the long, uneasy paper trail, just another fragment of this story. As investigators reviewed the pattern in Mary Ellen's case, abduction, forced bank withdrawals, a body left in a rural area, they increasingly considered whether her murder could be connected to other crimes, possibly committed by the same person who had killed Ruth Haut just 8 months prior.
But these are different locations, so, and I understand that there's similarities, but there's similarities in a lot of crimes. What do you think sparks the interest or the speculation that it's the same perpetrator?
Well, these are different areas, but if I'm reading my notes correctly here, you do have one agency that is involved in, so you have multiple agencies that are involved in these investigations, but one agency that's involved in both. And so I think it's easier to draw a line from A to B when you have investigators working crimes that not only appear to be similar in nature, but also they're similar in victimology. They're also similar in the fact that they took place within just an 8 or 9 month span of time.
And do these victims have similar looks?
I think it might be a stretch to say yes, but I would say that they don't look crazy dissimilar from one another. But keep in mind, when you have two cases with no rape or sign of sexual assault, I don't think that the appearance of the victim is what the perpetrator was honing in on. And look, the bank activity in both is very interesting. It's not completely off the radar, right? That somebody's abducted and then taken to a bank, but it doesn't happen that often. And in this case, it happened in both of these cases. And so where I say the victimology is very similar, it's similar in the nature that these individuals had access to funds, and clearly that's what the perpetrator wanted. If you want me to go into full profiler mode here, what I see is somebody who changed and adapted to the situation. Okay, so we both agreed that the first crime has indicators that suggest that it's well thought out and it's well planned. However, what was the outcome? Well, there was a security camera at the ATM. There was someone who may have spotted the suspect's vehicle. And so what do if I'm that guy or the perpetrators and I want to do a repeat, but what am I going to want to do? I'm going to want to eliminate all of the things that could have got me caught in the first one. And I'm going to want to exploit all of the things that I did that people have no witness of. So I don't want to drive if I'm sitting here going, oh yeah, I killed that lady and shit, my red truck was spotted at the Orange Grove.
Right.
Guess what I don't want to do this time is use my vehicle. Mary Ellen Wise, abducted 8-9 months later, was abducted using her vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
What else do I not want to do? I mean, you did. The report is that an ATM was accessed in Mary Ellen Wise's case, but did the perpetrator make Mary Ellen Wise do that? Because what I think is a difference here, and I couldn't find verification of it. I think that the ATM withdrawal in Mary Ellen Wise's case was a drive-up ATM.
Mm-hmm.
And what else is different in the second case that didn't go well for the perpetrator in the first one? He actually got money from the withdrawals in the second case. The first case, he didn't. What did police tell us about the first case? They think that it was actually the perpetrator, the abductor, who was attempting to access that ATM. Who accesses the ATM and who completes the withdrawal at the drive-through was the victim. So to me, all the similarities tell me it's the same person. The things that are different tell me that they're different for a reason, that he is evolving. He's trying to get better.
So because there's no sexual assault, that's probably not the motivation. So is it just simply the motivation is monetary?
Yeah. Cash box stolen at the first one. Bank card used at the first one. This one we have a withdrawal and a bank card used again in the second one. Now, keep in mind, this is Mary Ellen Wise is abducted and killed on November 2nd, 1992. And her body was found, 8 days later? So let's go on our timeline here to November 21st, 1992. So we're now in the same month, same general area of Florida, when a discount ticket salesman, his name Antonio Zuko, was beaten to death at a location on West U.S. Highway 192. So tourists stopping to ask for directions and to do some shopping. So they stop. They find this Antonio Zuko, the victim, age 50 at the time, in the bathroom of his ticket shop in Tourist Information Center. An undisclosed amount of cash and a number of tickets to area attractions were taken, along with Zuko's wallet. Deputies think that the murder weapon may have been a hammer. The Osceola Sheriff's Office was the lead investigating agency on this one. So in different parts of the country, especially in the 90s and especially in Florida, you would have these places that they would sell tickets to area attractions. And Florida being a huge tourist destination, you're going to have a lot of these people that they're basically vendors that sell the tickets. They make a little bit of money for selling the tickets. And this is what Antonio's business was. And it appears to detectives that somebody came in there with the intent of robbing him, but he's not abducted.
Right.
But also keep in mind, if the intent was robbery, that
cash is on hand.
I'm not going to argue that.
Right.
But what I would argue is I'm looking for the part in the piece of this story that tells me that the killer didn't think that he had to kill Antonio Zuko. I'm looking for the part of where Antonio Zuko fights back or puts the robber in a position where he thinks he has to kill to get out of there, or severely injure the individual. That part of the story, we don't have any good witnesses, so we don't have that part of the story.
But is it also something very simple, just the size and weight of the victim? Or like you said, the aggression back? It's more risky to try to abduct this individual.
One of the major reasons for murder would be to cover up another crime. And then how many times, it's always, you see it in the movies all the time, but it's a sad fact of life with these evil people that commit crimes. They don't think the way that you and I think. They don't see the victim as a human being that has a family and is a great guy and all these good things. They don't see that. They don't care. It's leave no witnesses. Who knows what Antonio could have told us about the person who robbed him and attacked him if he would have been around to tell us.
Well, there's a possibility there's no disguise. This killer could have just saw this as an opportunity. But would I be correct in saying that if you're law enforcement, you're looking for an individual more like the I-70 killer than a Ted Bundy?
Yes. The brutality of these attacks, especially with the type of instrument used on Mary Ellen Wise and now Antonio Zuko.
Right.
I mean, it's Ted Bundy without the rape portion of it.
The motivation seems to be simply money.
Yes. But I also think that there's a reason for the killing. And it's either if these are connected, we need to be very clear about that. If these are connected, there needs to be a reason for the killing. Could it just simply be leave no witness? Very likely. Could it be that the individual thinks that they could be identified later, or that they know any of these victims, or I believe in very rare occasions, the killer just can't stop themselves. It's part of it. And I can't tell you without more information if I feel strongly about that here, but it could just be part of it. And now we have to introduce to everyone another individual named Bonnie Goodson. And she lived a life that took her across several corners of this great country before it ended in a way that no family should ever have to imagine. Bonnie Goodson was born in Endicott, New York, and over time, her life carried her far from her hometown. Eventually, she made her way to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. From there, she relocated again, this time to Central Florida, moving to Kissimmee, Florida in 1975. She built a working life that placed her in a position of trust and familiarity in the community. She became a manager at a Kissimmee truck accessory store, also referred to as the Truck Accessory Superstore. Now, by the early 1990s, Bonnie was not only working, but pushing herself forward in a very personal way. She had recently returned to school through adult education classes. And after doing that while working her job, continuing her work responsibilities and her home life responsibilities, she managed to graduate and received a degree in June of 1992. Our timeline, we are now in November of 1992. This was the kind of milestone, this degree was supposed to be the kind of milestone that tends to mark a new chapter in someone's life. This was certainly proof that she was still building something for herself. Absolutely. She was also a wife and a mother, but then in late 1992, her life was broken by violence. On Monday, November 30th, Bonnie Goodson was at the truck accessory store located at 205 South Bermuda Avenue. We've heard that road name before.
Right.
This in Kissimmee. It was an afternoon. It's daylight, an ordinary time of day when people would be out shopping, working, running errands as such and such. At some point between 1:30 p.m. and 3 p.m., a robbery occurred inside the store. During that robbery, Bonnie was attacked. Police said she had been beaten unconscious, struck with a blunt instrument. 2 city employees entered the store and found her there, and she was airlifted to the hospital at about 3 p.m. that afternoon. An undetermined amount of cash was missing from the store, and an early description of the scene and the investigation from police made it clear that they were trying to piece together what happened and who was responsible. Their words were, "We are at the scene and we are scraping for clues." This is as they put it to the press.
Right. Do we have any eyewitness that sees any vehicle?
Here we have very little in the way of any type of witnesses, and it's very similar in that regard to the Antonio Zuko murder that took place really just days prior to this, where it appears somebody entered a building, entered a business, a store, and attacked, robbed, and killed the solo individual inside that business. Bonnie was taken to the Orlando Regional Medical Center, listed in critical condition. The injuries, of course, were severe. She underwent multiple surgeries. She spent hours in the intensive care unit as doctors fought to save her. And despite those efforts, she died that night around 9:45 p.m. after several hours of what they were hoping would be life-saving surgeries.
And that'd be tough too, because as a doctor, you're going, okay, I can save this life, but also we might be able to get justice if we're able to save her and she's able to tell us what happened.
Absolutely. In the aftermath of this, the Kissimmee police asked the public for help, emphasizing this little narrow window of when the attack occurred, right? They were asking anyone who had been in or near the truck accessory superstore at 205 South Bermuda Avenue between 1:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. on November 30th, 1992. What remains clearest in this telling is not only the brutality of this specific crime a senseless homicide committed during an afternoon robbery, but also the shape of the life it cut short. A mother with 2 daughters, a woman who had just celebrated the achievement of finishing her education in June of 92, only to be taken before she could fully step into whatever would come next for her. We only have small amounts of information, but I don't think that I need to point them out here that we have strong similarities to the Zucco murder that took place just days prior. And speaking of similarities, the grim symmetry between Ruth Haut's still unsolved case from February of 92 and Mary Ellen Wise's case continue to stand out to police, even clearer, in fact, much, much clearer, as their investigations would drag on. And those there would be both women were kidnapped, both were connected to bank withdrawals, and both were ultimately found dead in an outdoor rural location in Florida. But as we know, Captain, similarities do not by themselves deliver a conviction. They do, however, shape how people, family members, detectives, journalists, understand what might have happened and who might be responsible.
Right.
The year of 1992 would cast a long, dark shadow over central and southern Florida, potentially linking a series of brutal, unsolved crimes with an unnerving thread of similarity.
All right, we are back. Thanks for Tony Mother. Thanks for Tony Brother. Talk cans in the air. Cheers to the people in the back.
Thanks for telling your uncle that would be your mother's brother.
Yeah, if she has one. These crimes, to me, it makes you wonder, is just the killing the motivation and the money is an afterthought? Well, I abducted her. I should take the money. I have her. I haven't killed her yet, but
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's hard for a lot of people to comprehend, that idea, because murder is obviously such a much more consequential, heinous crime than robbery. But we are not criminals. We do not think like criminals. So when this hits your earballs, remind yourself that you're not a criminal and that they call it psycho for a reason.
Right.
That it's not easily understood. So where this sort of thinking would work out is into a different type of crime. And this is something that we were educated by the FBI on. So what we were told by an FBI agent, retired now, Jeffrey Reinick, who investigated a lot of crimes, child murders, sexual crimes, crimes that were sexual in nature, rape and things of that, serial rapists.
Mm-hmm.
One thing he taught us was that oftentimes when you're looking for a serial rapist, you may only have one actual rape, or at least only one in your file that's made it to your file, because we do know, unfortunately, due to the shame and the embarrassment and how the person is victimized, that some assault victims will not even come forward. But what he said is that oftentimes what he would find is that his perpetrator would be locked up or have been charged with other crimes that are not rape. And so that would be things of burglary or robbery, where the offender broke into a home or an apartment with the intent of sexually assaulting or raping the female individual that's inside that dwelling.
Right.
But because the person woke up, startled the burglar or the break-in or the would-be rapist, fought him off, managed to call police show up, any number of reasons, the person doesn't get charged with rape because they didn't commit the sexual assault or the rape, even though that was their intent when they broke into the home. They get charged with breaking and entering or robbery or burglary because they got caught inside the home or caught fleeing the home.
Right.
And so that goes along to with what you're thinking, and where, again, rape, sexual assault, much more heinous than just breaking in and hoping to steal some valuables. But it goes to intent. Now, intent is very hard to prove. Intent is also very difficult to get a direct line of insight on for these individuals. Again, they call it psycho for a reason. We finished up 1992 before the break, talk hands in the air. But 1993 in Central and South Florida is going to start off very differently, thank God. We're now at January 22nd, 1993 on our timeline. This was a day that did not go as planned for one individual, and that individual is a one Curtis Huff Jr. So the story, I'll summarize, but as printed in the Orlando Sentinel under the headline, Motel Owner Shoots Robber. Again, this is in Kissimmee, Florida, and we are at the Maple Leaf Motel on West U.S. Highway 192. Oh, also another road that we have mentioned in previous cases thus far in the telling of this true crime story. So this is framed as an account of a robbery attempt that didn't go the way the attacker expected, because the motel owner, Hamid Jebailey, this is my dude, this guy is a dude. He refused to stop fighting even after he had been badly injured by the robber, by his attacker. Deputies said the incident happened on a Friday afternoon inside the motel office. Jebailey was confronted by Curtis Huff Jr., a 24-year-old from Kissimmee, Florida. According to Jebailey and what he told police, Huff came in acting like a normal customer, asking about buying discount tickets to local attractions. Where have we heard that before? Ticket sales. For a moment, Jebailey said it looked like an ordinary interaction until Huff abruptly escalated the situation by throwing coffee into Jebailey's face. So the store owner is blinded by this hot coffee and shocked. And he says that is when Huff Jr. attacked him with a tire iron. And Huff beat him in the head with it hard enough to leave him with multiple head injuries and cuts. The assault was so severe that later witnesses would describe Jebailey as drenched in blood and unrecognizable. But even so, deputies said the beating wasn't the end of it. In the chaos, Curtis Huff Jr. produced a gun. What followed, investigators believed, was a violent struggle in close quarters for control of that weapon. What ends up happening here is Curtis Huff Jr. fires 3 shots during the course of this time that the two men are grappling. None of these shots, thankfully, hit Hamid Jebailey. Our dude Jebailey manages to wrench the gun away from Curtis Huff Jr., and now the balance of power has changed, my friends. 2 more shots were fired, but this is not while the gun is in the hands of Curtis Huff Jr. Jebailey's got control of this firearm. So by the time the struggle broke apart, Curtis Huff Jr. had been hit. Detectives said that he was struck in the right calf, but the scene did not end neatly. So after he's hit, the robber, later identified as Curtis Huff Jr., attempts to flee. Now, our victim, even though he's shot Huff Jr., he's very badly injured. So he collapses briefly, and I think this gives Huff the opportunity to try to get out of there. Jebailey, soaked in his own blood, keeps fighting. He gets up with sheer willpower, and he goes outside after Huff Jr. And so there's a lot going on right now, but you have 2 people that know Hamid Jebailey. They pull up. This is Eric and Jane Albury. They pulled up for what they would typically do. They would do this often. They would drop in for a quick visit to say hello to their friend. But instead, they pull up in their vehicle and they see their friend, who they don't recognize because he's drenched in blood, coming out of his own business, and he's holding a gun. So they're freaking out. Hamid is yelling at the guy who's attempting to flee on foot through the parking lot, but he's hobbling because he's been shot in the leg. And he's trying, Jebailey's trying to shoot him again, but because there's so much blood on the gun and on his hands, he couldn't quite get the hammer pulled back. So this is called in. This is it was a 38 caliber gun. And as said, Jebailey's thumb kept slipping off the hammer because it was too slick with blood from him to cock it. And the gun had already been fired 5 times by this point. So it seems like he was attempting for a 6th and maybe final shot on this dude, but the blood coating his hands defeated him in the moment. So police pull up. They end up getting a life flight helicopter for Curtis Huff Jr., and he is flown to the same medical facility where one of our victims, Goodson, had passed away prior, that Orlando Medical Center. Now, Huff's injuries are far less severe than what Goodson's were, and he survives being shot. But now he's being arrested for his robbery and assault on Hamid Jebailey at the Maple Leaf Motel. The Osceola Sentinel wrote about Curtis Huff Jr. and described him as a ticket salesman with a reputation for 2 things that did not seem to belong together: charm and sudden violence. He was identified as a habitual violent felony offender. And of course, this means he has a history and a pattern of violence that is recognized by our legal system. And he's been caught for these actions. Now, the short of this here, Captain, is that Curtis Huff Jr. would plead no contest to the charges brought against him in his robbery attempt at the Maple Leaf Motel. They linked him to another robbery. This was in the summer of 1992 when a ticket seller, again, an occupation we've already mentioned before, was attacked inside their business and left hogtied. Now, I wish we had further details on that, why this person was left alive. And it appears that that was not the intent here. I don't believe after striking Hamid in the head with a tire iron and then pulling a gun, I can't imagine that his intent was to leave Hamid alive. But regardless, what takes place here is he pleads no contest to the crimes that we know he's absolutely guilty of, the Maple Leaf Motel attack and attempted robbery, to the one he's suspected of that they were going to charge him with, but they don't charge him with that robbery from the summer of 92 in sort of a plea agreement.
So he's going to be locked up.
He's going to be locked up. But what's interesting here is we have 2 witnesses now, right? The hogtied victim and our dude Jebailey. So these 2 cases, both victims tell a story that starts off very similar of Curtis Huff Jr. doing something that it's routine business, right? The victims say that he approached them, simply wanted to buy tickets to an attraction. They both described his demeanor as calm, friendly, and chatty. They say is the type of person that's easy to talk to and the type of person that you can talk up and very quickly become familiar with just simply within minutes. But both of them said the same thing, that comfortable moment didn't last. And they said that the shift in this individual was not gradual. It was abrupt. Both of them said the same words. He snapped. It was like he snapped. So Patricia Bennett was the victim who was hogtied in the summer robbery. She said that like his physical description changed too.
Well, we've heard this from other detectives.
She said that when she was looking at him when she believes it was that he snapped. She says, these are her words, it was like his nose spread and his eyes seemed to turn hard, very violent. It wasn't only what he did, it was how quickly the person in front of me no longer matched the man who had been chatting with me moments earlier. So both of them simply say that he seemed to snap at the same time that he demanded money, and he became very violent right away. And Bennett, she says that the situation became almost as non-negotiable. She says he's putting on rubber gloves and now I'm begging for my life.
Well, we have gloves in other cases as well.
So this Curtis Huff Jr. was designated as a habitual offender, and this was tied to, he's still fairly young, he's 24, but this is tied to an earlier chapter in his life. He had served time in prison in Indiana for a string of Midwest robberies that took place in the late 1980s. Again, a pattern reportedly looking somewhat familiar to what's going on here in Florida. Well, at least the two we know he's guilty of. He was allowed to serve out his parole. Once he's paroled for those crimes, he was allowed to serve that out in the state of Florida. He is originally from Vero Beach, as I understand it. He's a graduate of Vero Beach High School.
So going back to his hometown to commit crimes.
Well, I imagine that's probably why he was allowed to serve his parole in that state, because that's not typically the way these things go down. They don't really love you moving out of state in most cases. Once he's back in Florida, he found work as a ticket salesman for area attractions. Again, this is a job that itself mirrors some of these robberies.
Right. So he would have an understanding of the layout, possibly understanding of how the business works, how they collect money.
And also, so this is May of 1993. He attempted to rob the motel in January. And after his arrest and they pull the bullet from his leg, he's a great guy, Captain. He was he's at the Osceola County Jail leading a Bible study group. Oh, yeah. We probably shouldn't give him the maximum penalty, should we? He's a man of God, and he's trying to educate the other individuals and lead them to the light.
Well, in fairness, the Bible is a very violent book.
Yes, the violence in the Bible is...
They crucified a guy.
They did.
Yeah.
That was part of it.
That's a little part of it. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a part of it. But so the judge, thankfully, sees through this BS of him being a Bible study leader at the jail, and he receives 20 years, a 20-year sentence, and he will not be eligible for parole for 10 years of that. And look, this punishment was structured to ensure a long stretch of confinement for this individual. And I'm looking to see if I have in my notes here what the judge said at the sentencing, because he
said, "Listen here, you little piece of shit."
I don't have the direct quote in my notes here, but basically he's saying, like, when I look at you and I see you and I review what you are here being charged with and the details of these crimes, that there's something psychologically wrong and violent with you. So while Curtis Huff Jr. is locked up, in 1995, Osceola County investigators officially named Curtis J. Huff Jr. as a primary suspect in the murder of Ruth Haut, the chiropractor. They say that the circumstantial evidence against him was substantial and damning. And then they also say that there are similarities in that crime that mirror other crimes, unsolved crimes that they have in that area at about that same time period. Those being the ones that we just went through. So Let's go through this evidence here, Captain. First, the truck. Curtis Huff Jr. owned a red 1991 GMC Sonoma pickup truck, matching the description of the vehicle seen near the orange grove where Ruth's body was found. Another witness says that they saw a pickup truck near Antonio Zuco's business. Now, we don't get a great description of that pickup truck other than a small pickup truck. We do know that tire tracks at the Haut crime scene where her body was found matched for the BF Goodrich tires that were found to be on Curtis Huff's truck. A Children of the Sun cassette tape with no case was found inside of Curtis Huff's truck. Remember the empty case for that exact tape, or, well, maybe not that exact tape, but
Right. But a tape
matching that was found near Ruth's body. ATM footage. Remember the physical description provided by police after further analysis of that footage? A smaller man, Curtis Huff Jr., is 5'4" tall.
There you go.
And this seems like a kind of not so important thing, but they're saying he was known to wear hooded sweatshirts a lot. He grew up in Vero Beach. He lived a short distance from the very bank where Ruth's ATM card was used. His girlfriend at the time told police that he traveled there often to that bank. Footprints from Reebok sneakers were found at the crime scene where Haut's body was found, matched a pair of Reeboks that were seized from Curtis Huff's father's home in St. Cloud, where he was living at the time of his arrest.
Well.
The Mike Greenwell appointment, the name used for the final appointment at Ruth's office, Mike Greenwell, was the name of a Boston Red Sox left fielder, as we said earlier. Curtis Huff was an avid baseball fan who also played left field for a local softball team. Huff's girlfriend in 1992 lived near Ruth Haut's chiropractic office. Furthermore, detectives verified that a truck bed cover, the one on the bed of Huff's truck, had been purchased from the very store where Bonnie Goodson worked and was murdered. And we know that Curtis Huff was also in the ticket business. And what did they find on him when he was arrested? He had Antonio Zuco's business card in his wallet when he was arrested.
And you wonder if they're able to get any DNA off the glove that was found.
It doesn't stop there. Huff's parents knew Mary Ellen Wise.
Can't stop, won't stop.
They lived across the street from her. Now, not at the time of her murder, but she lived in that house for a long period of time. They knew her, and they said that Curtis Huff knew her as well. And it goes beyond that. His stepfather, his name's John Herron, said that they were close, fairly close friends with Mary Ellen Wise, and later told investigators that Curtis Huff knew Mary Ellen had been hurt in an auto accident and received a large settlement. So remember, we talked about her being severely injured in a car accident. Right. She, from a lawsuit of that injury, from that car accident, they settled. The settlement was for, I believe, $1 million or a little more than $1 million. It took her 10 years to recover, physically recover. She had to damn near teach herself to walk again.
Right.
She spent a lot of time in hospitals, a lot of surgeries to put her back together again. And she gets the settlement, but the settlement was a stipend. They paid it out in monthly payments. And from my understanding, she received $1,500 a month. Oh, well, that pretty much matches up with what's reported on how much was withdrawn from her bank account on the day that she was abducted. $500 from an ATM, $1,000 for a check written for the drive-through. And his stepfather, when John Herron was shown the ATM photo from the Ruth homicide, the stepfather says, look, although the suspect's face isn't visible, the posture suggested to him that the person could very possibly be his stepson. His exact words, very possibly could be my stepson. In regard to the Mary Ellen Wise case, now the detectives are starting to open up, but they collected, keep in mind, they're getting a lot of this information, a lot of this evidence after the fact that he's arrested. And then they get a search warrant for Curtis Huff's father's home where he was living, and they find some additional evidence there. This is all building and building with this Curtis Huff thing. I think they had some suspicions that some of these cases were connected, but now they have a lot of suspicions, and they're being a little more vocal about what their suspicions were early on in some of these investigations, stating that, look, when we were looking into the Mary Ellen Wise case, the lead investigator stated very quickly that I don't think it's the first time this killer's acted. Two of the autopsy reports, okay, so you have those of Mary Ellen Wise and Bonnie Goodson, were described by the lead investigator as eerily similar. Both victims had 11 fractures to the skull and defensive breaks to the arms. Homicide by blunt force trauma to the head is relatively uncommon, making a pattern like this stand out. Despite the mountain of circumstantial evidence, Curtis J. Huff Jr. was never charged with the murders of Ruth Haut, Mary Ellen Wise, Bonnie Goodson, or Antonio Zuko. In Bonnie Goodson's case, a witness saw a man walking away from the crime scene but was unable to pick Curtis Huff out of a lineup. Ultimately, prosecutors could not indict Huff for the Goodson murder, and the evidence across the other three cases wasn't strong enough to charge him.
But how much time is he going to spend?
Well, remember, he received a 20-year sentence. In the end, he served 12 years. So using our highly sophisticated garage math, that means that this guy gets out in 2005. And because law enforcement simply could not get him for any of these murders, this 5'4" shit stack built like a fire plug is free to roam and kill again.
Right. And will. I mean, like you said, charming with a very short fuse seems to be a unique characteristic.
Well, and you hear, in all fairness, we have to be clear, as we were just very clear, he's not been charged in any of these murders, not been convicted of any of them, but we heard this in John Wayne Gacy. We heard it with Ted Bundy. They didn't look like a killer. I would tell you that Curtis Huff Jr. does not look like a killer to me either.
Right.
Doesn't mean that he isn't. These guys are not so easily spotted. So the years passed since the 1992 murders. A new brutality shocked Vero Beach, Florida. This is in July of 2006 when 87-year-old Helen McFersonson was murdered in her home. Helen lived in Vero Beach for 60 years. She was a homemaker and a member of the First Baptist Church. She was widowed in 2000, and so she spent her days at her home and in her neighborhood. On the evening of Friday, July 14th, 2006, Helen's son, Doug, and her daughter-in-law took Helen to dinner at Swenson's restaurant. I love Swenson's. If you have one near you, go to it immediately. Keep listening
not
to the
a sponsor,
podcast.
but we would love for them to sponsor the show.
I love the Sloppy Joe. All right. So this Swenson's is on U.S. Highway 1 in Vero Beach. After dinner, what a good son, taking mom out to dinner, brings her back home, returns her to her home. They're watching TV for a little bit, and then they leave, they say, between 8 and 9 p.m. When they leave, good son reminds mom, lock your door. The next day, Saturday, July 15th, a neighbor noticed a screen missing from Helen's door. So she's got the screen door, and then you have the actual door. The screen is missing from that screen door. So the neighbor calls the son, says, hey, the screen door is popped out, or you might want to go check on your mom. He tries calling her. We're now at 5:45 p.m. the following day. Can't get her on the phone, so they decide they're going to drive out there and check on mom. So around 6 p.m., unfortunately, they found Helen's lifeless body in her bedroom, lying against the wall with blood on her face. The home and her bedroom had been ransacked, things turned upside down. They call 911 immediately. The medical examiner revealed multiple injuries from both strangulation and blunt force trauma inflicted with a sharp-edged object. And the investigators on the scene described the killing as among the most vicious they had ever seen. There were no gunshots, no stab wounds. Helen had been beaten with an unknown object or instrument, they said. She was not sexually assaulted. There were signs of forced entry through the carport door. And they also noted in the report that there had been, or according to the son and the neighbor, an attempted break-in 10 days prior that Helen did not report. So Curtis Huff Jr. gets out in 2005 after serving 12 years of his 20-year sentence. Upon release, he moved to 5825 20th Street in Vero Beach, about a mile from Helen's residence. He's living just north of a Target store and across from the Ryan Wood Shopping Center.
This guy's a real douchebag.
These are places that Helen's son would tell police that she went frequently. And so he is suspected of involvement in prior cases that have similarities. And a lot of this really is the blunt force trauma along with the robberies. To his defense here, Captain, investigators compared his fingerprints, which obviously they are going to have on file, to partial prints that were recovered from Helen's crime scene. They did not match. What do we know about if Curtis Huff committed these prior murders? What do we know about that killer? He wore gloves. So it's logical to assume that maybe he did, if he was in fact the person that broke into Helen McPherson's home. The case, just like the others, had been in and out of the news over the years.
Well, and hold on for a second, because we have a handful of crimes that we see the similarities, we see the connections, but those are just the ones we know of. This guy could be responsible for so many crimes.
You're exactly right. And keep in mind, he lived in a couple of different states. And so
So when did this start? I mean, he's pretty young when he first gets locked up, but this could have started late teens.
Well, you can track his footprints to areas like Michigan, Indiana, and then regarding the charges that he gets convicted of, and we know he's later on parole for in Florida, were for robberies in what's simply stated as Midwest states. So how far did he travel during that time? And like you said, I think I don't know that he did all 5 of these. I feel very confident that he did 2 or 4 of them. And if he did any of them at all, and he's got other priors, like you said, it would be dumb not to question how many other cases could this guy be involved with. And if he is of the type that the violence and the murder is part of it for him, or that it's simply leave no witnesses, does he have other homicides in and out of the state of Florida? This case, they have openly said in some of these cases that Curtis Huff Jr. is a suspect. They've also openly named him as a person of interest. So this is nothing new here with this guy. It's just a name that most of us have never heard. And crimes that need more awareness, a string of crimes that need more awareness outside of this area. This case, just like so many that we've covered, has been in and out of the news since 2006 and the earlier crimes of 1992. But there's been not any real movement on the cases, even though they've been in and out of the news since. We are told that the cases are not cold and that law enforcement agencies continue to work the cases. I would put together a task force on these 5 homicides led by a cold case expert. Underline the word expert about 10 times. I believe that there are reasons to work some of these cases together and others on the periphery. So these unsolved 5 homicides remain for the families more than cold case files. These are ongoing stories without endings, without answers, stories marked by very specific dates, specific places, and a reoccurring name that investigators had pointed to, but never successfully carried through to a prosecution. As of June of 2026, 34 years have passed since the terrible string of murders in 1992, and 20 years since Helen McPherson was killed in her home. The murders of Ruth Haut, Mary Ellen Wise, Bonnie Goodson, Antonio Zuko, and Helen McPherson remain officially unsolved. Investigators continue to ask the public for help, hoping that one tip will finally break the silence. The families are still suffering. trapped in the torment of not knowing, while a prime suspect in at least 4 of the cases was never brought to trial for them. For the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, the promise to Helen's family remains firm. Quote, "We're confident that we're going to get there," end quote. So in the quiet seaside community of Vero Beach, Florida, a shadow from the past looms large. A chilling narrative of violence that has haunted families in this community for decades. This story begins and ends with a man named Curtis Huff Jr., whose name is linked to a string of brutal, unsolved murders that terrorized Central and South Florida. With a criminal history that already included an attempted murder conviction, Curtis Huff Jr. is a central figure in a dark chapter of Florida's history.
I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the garage. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and check out truecrimegarage.com. Colonel, do we have any recommended reading for the beautiful listeners?
Yes, Captain. Let's go way back. This title is from 1983. I love these old back pocket true crime paperbacks.
Yeah.
This one is titled Mass Murders, Human Time Bombs. They explode in violence to kill by the dozen. This is way back when they still sold True Detective magazine. And this is from the files of True Detective magazine. Mass Murderers from True Detective magazine, edited by Rose Manslenberg. You don't have to write down that title now. We will have it listed on our website, on our recommended page. Just go to truecrimegarage.com.
And until next week,
be good, be kind, and don't limit.